So, one of the things something that's really frustrating to me about, you know, about the lack of ability to take care of, other things in the Nigerian economy that we should is our tendency, the excessive focus on oil revenue. You know, if you really think about it, the most resource rich countries, a lot of them are the poorest. So the idea that we have oil, we obsess about that. We focus on oil revenue. Everybody at the top hovers around that. If anything, I think that that is something that actually incentivizes mismanagement. Why? Because when you have something like that, that's like a precious commodity, that's just like one thing or two things. Let's say oil and gold. You have one or two things that are precious commodities in that way. It's almost like it's easier for it to just end up being a situation where a few people just really hover around the revenue stream that is coming to the country from that, and then split it amongst themselves and then spend the money abroad or whatever, and never really like disperse it among the people. And if you're from an African country or any country that's resource rich, maybe in South America too, and you live in the West, one of the things you get all the time, one of the things I would get all the time at my workplace or in education at my law school, wherever, one of the things I would get over the years from people who consider themselves to be intellectual would be like, oh, in Nigeria, that is precious where you were from. That is such a resource-rich country. It is so bad they don't spend it on the people. I would get people who say stuff like that. And it's like, most of the countries that have that, they don't end up spending on the people. Some of them try, but even the ones who do, like Venezuela, um, even they had a problem. Just depending on resources in general tends to be a problem. But more importantly, I think a lot of resource-rich countries end up in a situation where it just becomes more convenient to not even bother how to learn how to disperse the resources among the people. If you think about it, it's like if you have oil and you have tin and you have whatever, you don't even need educated people to run the country. You just need you're just gonna have a bunch of like gangsters who say, you sit over there, you sit up there, we manage the oil, it's ours. And they just plant a flag there and they just do like they want among themselves. I feel like it just incentivizes a lot of crappy dynamics that I think almost would not even be there if the place were not resource rich. If it were a poor country that needed to depend on the brain of the people, it would almost be better off, because then the smart people would be in power, because it wouldn't give rise, it wouldn't give the opportunity to people who were just like, I want oil, I put flag, I command oil, I'm an army guy. It wouldn't give, people like that the opportunity to dominate. But in environments, in resource-rich countries, it often just incentivizes a lot of crappy dynamics like that. And so it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So diversifying the economy is something that, in a place like Nigeria, you hear them talk about all the time, for decades, but never really do. And I'm concerned that one of the reasons they don't do it is because they don't want to do it, because it kind of takes power out of their hands more, and it distributes the power a little bit more. And then imagine like having a country of 200 million people who eat one or two meals a day, who bow down to you. People are sick enough to be addicted to something like that and almost kind of not want the people to do well. If there was a huge why would they focus on diversifying the economy when they're rich and they're getting what they want out of it? Because if they did that and they broke down that sector and that was a smaller part of their economy, and everybody and other people were more engaged in the economy, then they would be more challenged. They would have more people who are rich through other means and were able to challenge them. So it's a really frustrating sort of dynamic. It's a dynamic, it's a cyclical sick problem that just stays stuck. It's just a cycle that is just stuck on the same problem. So one would just actually wish for the country for, renewable energy to kick in and just oil to go away. Because if that happened, then wow, they would have to like encourage human capital. And by God, they would have to like make the place like a favorable place for all the, people of Nigerian heritage who are abroad to come back to. They don't care about the diasporans a lot of times, which is rubbish because that's the greatest source of revenue in a lot of ways for that country. You know how many $1 billion people spend there who have family there? But a lot of times they don't pay attention to them. Why? Because they have their, or they don't seem to care about, how much they need them as much. And the country loses out a lot on that. Tourism is one of those great, great opportunities for Nigeria that it doesn't explore. If I was able to spend like summers in Nigeria during college working on things and working on initiatives, I would have done so. But you know what? That environment is not conducive to any of that. It's not a comfortable place to be for anybody unless you're used to just drinking water that's bad, having no electricity, unless you're used to all that stuff, you're probably gonna go there and die. One of my sister's med school friends ended up going to Nigeria. He went to Ibadan, and I was afraid for him the whole time. I was like, oh, just because you know me, please don't like go, because you're probably not going to survive it. And what frustrates me is not that country can't make that place comfortable for us to come back to. Myself and anybody else who is interested to go for the short term or the long term, whatever I might be, whether 3 months or 3 years or 30 years. The point is the people who are there don't care to do it. Look at Ghana, it's not that hard. They have all their homecoming things. They have because their environment is conducive to doing so. Look at Rwanda and Kigali, they can do that because the environment is conducive to doing so. Look at South Africa. But for some reason, Nigeria doesn't have that and doesn't want to have that. They're so full of agbada and ako and whatever else. It's so irritating. All I want is for the country to thrive, for the people to thrive, and for that to be the focus of those in charge of those things, period. I don't care to hear anything else from them. I don't care what else they're wearing. I don't care what other forms of authority they have. That authority doesn't mean anything if it's not being dispensed in a useful way. If it's just shouting in a forest uselessly, I don't really see what it's doing. There just needs to be such a sobering. There just needs to be such a sobering in that nation. And I'm just so concerned that it's painful. Do you know how many successful Nigerian doctors there are all over the world? Do you know how many state-of-the-art hospitals that are in Nigeria itself? Do you know what happens when the Nigerian president and all the senators, when they get sick? Do you know which hospitals they try to go to? It's so sick. It's so embarrassing, and I don't understand how it doesn't embarrass them. Maybe because they don't have to be abroad and think about it and being confronted with having to hear about it. But the rest of us do. When I started paying more close attention to this stuff a few years ago, and all this stuff was going on, you had candidates like Shore, you had candidates like Mogalu, and they were drawing attention to more of these things. They were drawing more attention to these things. And I thought, this is good. They are hearing. This is going to be better. They are paying attention. They're finding out somebody who's telling them. If nobody told them before, now somebody is telling them. But nothing changed. That's why it's hard for me to take them seriously now. Because the presumption in a situation like that is, oh, well, nobody told them that. Nobody has to. A few years ago, you had people telling them that, and then it seemed like that was entering their ears. 3 years later, everything is the same. Even worse. That's just inconceivable. At least 3 years ago, there was no talk of disintegration. There was no talk that we were going to be having 3-4 nations. Now that's all you hear. How is that possible? Buhari, that administration that fought so hard to be in power, that felt it didn't need all those young people following Shore around. It didn't need all those, it wanted to laugh at them and push them to the side. Okay, so what did you do? And don't tell me that it's like, oh, but we have this and we have that. No, 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 no. If you have the Eiffel Tower and nobody's in it, it doesn't mean anything. The vast majority of that population, 80% I'd say, is surviving on 1 or 2 meals a day still to this day, worse than they were before. Show me projects that the vast majority of people are benefiting from, that the vast majority of people are enjoying, that the vast majority of people can say that their lives are better because of it. You fought so hard to hang on. So what was it? What are the results of it? Let's see it. It's almost like things better change this time around. They're gonna change. That's why the people are frustrated. That's why they're lashing out. And don't tell me about like, oh, we have insecurity issues because, they're just, A lot of those problems are just related to poverty and the lack of efficiency of the governance. I hear the governors crying to the president cries back to the governor and says, what do you want me to do? What kind of rubbish is that? Who's in charge? And if they are, why don't they know that they are and fix it?